Chapter 9. At the break of dawn, the journey back to Etherwind's capital began. The skies, painted in soft amber hues, bore witness to the magnificent flight of the great sorcerer Vaelorian. With wings that shimmered like obsidian in sunlight, he soared high above, carrying the revered three wise mages upon his powerful back. Their robes billowed in the wind like ancient banners of forgotten times, their expressions calm yet vigilant. Below, along the winding path that curved through the heartlands of the kingdom, for figures pressed forward on horseback. Tilly rode at the front, her eyes forward but her heart heavy. At her side rode Aster, ever watchful, his blade resting against his back like a silent vow. Close behind followed Callum and Fable, their presence steady, bonded by battles fought and loyalties tested. The wind carried more than just dust. It whispered tales of the blood they had shed, of the darkness they had survived. But the shadows of Duskmoor crept upon them once more. From the edges of the wildwood, corruption stirred. A vampire, pale as winter frost, a goblin, wicked and snarling, and a necromancer cloaked in shadows emerged, drawn by vengeance and the scent of living blood. Before the enemy could strike, the heavens answered. Vaelorian let out a cry that shook the treetops as the three wise mages, cloaked in ancient light, extended their staffs. Bolts of magic, luminous and pure, ripped through the air, searing through darkness like a blade through silk. The creatures howled, turning to smoke and ash. Then came Aster, swift as a falling star, his sword a blur of silver. With a single, deadly stroke, he felled the last fiend. Silence followed, sharp, reverent, sacred. Night fell gently upon the land, and the weary group found solace in the forest's embrace. A fire crackled in their camp, its warmth a comfort against the encroaching cold. Vaelorian and the three wise mages lingered nearby, unmoving, eternal guardians in the darkness. By the time the second dawn broke, the capital's silhouette rose like a dream upon the horizon. Golden light bathed the towers of Etherwind, glinting off glass windows and ivory stone. Hope swelled in their hearts, fragile but glowing. Vaelorian soared ahead, his mighty form descending toward the castle balcony like a comet of fate to meet the king and queen of Etherwind. The three wise mages remained poised on his back, eyes forward, ready. Below, the four heroes Tilly, Aster, Callum, and Fable dismounted. Their boots met the cobbled road with a solemn rhythm as they stepped toward the grand castle gates, tired, scarred, but still standing. They had returned. Under the pale cloak of night, the winds shifted over the towering silhouette of the distant castle. The air was thick with tension, the scent of battle still lingering as Callum and Fable made their way across the castle grounds. Their footsteps were swift and purposeful, disappearing into the shadows of the night, leaving only the quiet echo of leather boots against stone. Moments later, Aster and Tilly emerged from the gloom. Side by side, they strode toward the heart of the courtyard, the moon casting silver light upon their path. Their expressions were cautious, their pace steady, but neither could shake the unease curling in the pit of their stomachs. Then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. A burst of brilliant, colored light flared to life, slicing through the darkness like a blade. Magic filled the air. And just as suddenly as the light appeared, it vanished. In its place stood Sage. She materialized out of thin air, arms crossed and eyes gleaming with mischievous confidence. Her sudden appearance drew gasps. Tilly recoiled in shock, and Aster's expression darkened into fury. With a practiced motion, his hand flew to his side, drawing a silver blade that shimmered under the torchlight. "Aha, handsome," Sage said, her voice laced with cool amusement. "Put the sword away. I wouldn't try anything if I were you." Aster's grip tightened. "What are you going to do?" Sage's gaze never wavered. I'll take my sister if you don't mind. Her tone was calm, casual, even condescending. Aster stepped forward, refusing to back down. Then at least take me with you. Sage chuckled, arching a brow. Well, it's your funeral. No, Aster, don't. Tilly cried, her voice cracking as fear took hold. But it was too late. A heavy mist began to roll in. Thick, magical, unnatural. It swirled around them, glowing faintly under the moonlight. A wind rose from nowhere, lifting their cloaks, tugging at their hair. And then, in the blink of an eye, they were gone. The mist dispersed, leaving only silence behind. The world around them reformed with an oppressive weight. Cold stone walls loomed overhead, and the soft flicker of torchlight cast long shadows that danced like specters along the damp floor. Iron bars lined the perimeter, and the unmistakable stench of confinement filled the air. Aster stood rigid, his jaw clenched, fury still simmering in his eyes. Tilly trembled beside him, fear etched into her every breath. Across from them, behind a wall of magical barriers, stood Sage, arms on her hips, her expression unreadable. They were no longer in Etherwyn. The truth settled like lead in their chests. They were in the heart of Duskmoor now, its royal jail, the stronghold of their enemy. And they were prisoners. Sage stood tall in the torchlight, her hands on her hips and her expression sharp with satisfaction. Now that wasn't so difficult, was it? Goodbye, she said, voice cold and mocking as she turned away. Wait, Tilly called out, her voice trembling as she took a step forward. Sage paused, but didn't turn around. Tilly clutched her chest, the words catching in her throat. Sage, the king and queen of Duskmoor have been manipulating you your whole life. They were shaping you into a weapon to pit Etherwyn against Duskmoor. Her voice wavered with desperation. Please, check their chambers or something. Find the truth for yourself. I am so terribly sorry for how Duskmoor, and even our parents, the king and queen of Etherwyn, have treated you. Tears welled in her eyes. But I swear to you as your sister, I will never betray you. I will never let anyone take advantage of you. If you come with us back to Etherwind, please. Tilly stood there, breathless and trembling, her hands clenched at her sides. But Sage only laughed. You expect me to believe that, she said, turning back with a sneer. Oh, how naive you are, Tilly. You think a few pretty words can undo a lifetime of power. She flipped her hair over one shoulder with a smug smile. Pathetic. And with that, she vanished into the shadows. Tilly collapsed into sobs, her body trembling as the tears flowed freely. Aster stepped forward silently, his face carved with sorrow. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried against his chest. She clung to him, seeking comfort in the only warmth left in the darkness of Duskmoor. Sage strode down the dimly lit hallway of Duskmoor's castle, her boots clicking against the cold stone floor. The torchlight flickered across the damp walls, casting long, haunting shadows in her wake. She told herself she had scoffed at Tilly's words, dismissed them, laughed in her face. And yet, the echo of her sister's voice clung to her like smoke. Sage slowed, her confident steps faltering as doubt began to slither through her thoughts. They were shaping you into a weapon. Please check their chambers. She rubbed her chin, eyes narrowed. Her mind was a battlefield of conflicting truths and shadows she'd never dared to question, until now. Etherwyn. Duskmoor. Had she truly been nothing more than a pawn all along? Crafted from birth to ignite a war between two kingdoms? Her arms folded tightly across her chest, jaw clenched. The possibility gnawed at her pride. Her power was her own, wasn't it? And yet, something in Tilly's voice, soft, desperate, genuine, had reached her. Sage didn't understand why it mattered, but it did. She sighed, the sound weary and laced with something heavier than anger. And with that breath, she made her decision. Sage had searched the chambers of her adoptive parents with calculated care. She moved quietly, touching little, eyes sweeping over every surface. But there was nothing, no hidden letters, no secret documents, not even a misplaced whisper of guilt. Still, something felt wrong. Now she stood just outside the ornate double doors of Duskmore's throne room, her back pressed to the cold stone wall. Inside, the king, queen, and their son, the prince, were gathered. If there were answers to be found, they wouldn't be carved into stone or scribbled in ink. They would be spoken. 2 guards stood firm at the door, spears in hand, eyes forward. There was no slipping past them unnoticed. But Sage, ever resourceful, spun a clever excuse, a fabricated royal summons, an urgent errand from the queen herself. The guards, grumbling, took their leave. Alone now, she exhaled slowly and turned to the doors. Her heartbeat thudded in her chest as she pressed one palm against the cool wood. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet incantation in the old tongue. A golden shimmer bloomed beneath her fingertips, then melted into the grain of the door. A hum filled her ears, subtle, warm, and alive. Her spell had worked. And then she listened. Inside the throne room, opulence clung to the air like perfume, thick, suffocating, and cold. The high-backed obsidian throne was occupied by King Zephyrian, his arms folded, a scowl etched deep into his brow. Beside him stood Queen Liltheria, her posture proud and icy, while their son, Prince Kedros, leaned casually against a marble pillar with an arrogant smirk. Sage, unseen beyond the door, listened as their voices echoed through the hall. "Why haven't the king and queen of Etherwind formed allegiance yet?" Kedros asked, mockingly. There was amusement in his voice, a cruel, biting edge. "What are they waiting for? For their people to perish?" "Huh!" His laughter rang out, light and merciless. King Zephyrian chuckled from the throne. "Patience, lad. Our plan has been in motion since Sage was born." There was a beat of silence as Sage's breath caught in her throat. "We shaped her into us," the king continued, voice thick with pride. "A perfect weapon. A tool for our victory." Queen Liltheria giggled softly, and Zephyrian's laughter returned, colder this time, more dangerous. "I know Sage is older than I," Kedros drawled, "which means she would rule both kingdoms." He rolled his eyes. "That is something we will never allow." Queen Liltheria scoffed lightly. "We raised her. She will listen to us as she always has." Another pause. "But if she dares to fight back." King Zephyrian's voice dropped lower, sharper, like the blade of a dagger. "We will have to deal with her." Just beyond the heavy castle doors, Sage stood frozen, her back pressed against the cold stone wall, her fingertips still faintly glowing from the spell that had allowed her to hear what no child was ever meant to. The voices from within the throne room faded, but their words kept echoing in her mind, over and over, like a curse. Shock. Absolute, paralyzing shock. Every word they had spoken, it shattered her. Tilly was right. She had been right all along. Sage's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. Her knees nearly buckled. She had never been their daughter, never their heir, never their savior. She was crying now, quiet, broken sobs shaking her slender frame. She had been stolen, taken from the doorstep of a village farmer. Raised in luxury, but not out of love. She was crafted, like a sword, forged for war. For them. Not even after all she'd done, battles fought, loyalties proven, blood spilled, would they grant her the place she had earned. Because she was never meant to rule. It was all a lie. Her entire life. A strategy. A game. A cruel trick. The people she had believed rescued her, They had only ever imprisoned her in a story she didn't write. They never loved her. Not her real parents. Not the king and queen of Duskmoor. To them, she was nothing more than a tool. Her heart cracked open, raw and trembling. Her hands shook at her sides. The pain was so sharp it felt as if her very soul might crumble into dust. She tried to breathe. Once. Again. Deeper this time. But the ache wouldn't ease. She was suffocating in silence. And then Tilly. The thought of her sister flickered in the darkness like a dying candle refusing to go out. Tilly had promised. She swore she would never betray her. That she would fight for her. That she would love her. Could she be Sage's only hope? Or was it foolish to hope at all? Maybe she couldn't trust anyone. Maybe trusting was how she had been broken in the first place. Maybe it was time to go rogue. No more kings. No more queens. No more lies. The cold air in the royal jail was still, heavy with the scent of damp stone and the faint echo of distant guards. Lantern light flickered against the walls, casting long shadows across the faces of the 3 figures standing in 2 separate cells. Sage stood on one side of the bars, arms crossed and jaw clenched. Her eyes, stormy and unreadable, met Tilly's across the divide. Aster stood nearby, his expression dark with restrained frustration, arms folded as if holding himself together. "You were right," Sage snapped, voice sharp and brittle. Tilly's breath hitched. "I did some digging," Sage continued, stepping forward with fire behind her words. "And my whole life is a lie all over again." Her voice trembled with something deeper than rage, betrayal, exhaustion, disbelief. "How do I know the promise you made is genuine?" she demanded. "How do I know that once I help you, you won't use me, just like everyone else has since the day I was born?" Tilly didn't flinch. She took a breath and stepped closer to the bars, voice quiet but resolute. "Sage, I swear to you I would never do that." Her hand pressed to her chest as she spoke, her tone trembling with sincerity. "You have magic. If I ever betray you or use you..." Her voice cracked. "You can curse me, harm me, turn me into a creature, an animal, anything you wish." Aster's eyes widened. "Tilly," he barked, startled by her offer. She only glanced at him, sadness pooling in her gaze. "Yes," she said softly, "but it's true." She turned back to Sage with a shaky breath, voice low but steady. "Sage, I have a way to convince our parents to let you stay in my palace. I can guarantee you that." Sage's brows knit, but she said nothing. "I know," Tilly said gently. "We missed a chunk of our lives without knowing each other." She laid a hand over her heart again. "But we're still young. We're only 20. We have our whole lives ahead of us to get to know each other. To be twin sisters. As we should have been from the very beginning." Silence fell between them, heavy and vulnerable. Then Sage let out a long breath, shoulders slowly relaxing. "All right then," she said at last. "Let's save your friend. And the others." She narrowed her eyes, a warning in her voice. "But I swear, if you're all using me..." She jabbed a finger toward both Tilly and Aster. "I'll turn both of you into tiny creatures," she growled, her tone somewhere between dead serious and wildly unhinged, "and you can live your merry little lives like that." Tilly gave a small laugh, half relief, half nervous energy, then did something impulsive. She ran. Tears welled in her eyes as she rushed forward, through the cell door now open. She didn't stop until she reached Sage and threw her arms around her. Sage tensed, startled by the sudden contact. Tilly clung to her tightly, arms wrapped around her sister as though anchoring herself in a storm. For a breathless moment, Sage didn't move. Then, she didn't pull away either. Chapter 10. The cave was dark and damp, filled with the slow, rhythmic sound of dripping water echoing against the stone. Faint light trickled in from the mouth of the cavern, but the air was heavy, tired, like the people trapped within it. Cove leaned against the wall, his breath shallow, body trembling from hunger and fatigue. Sonnet sat not far from him, clutching her arms to her chest as cramps twisted through her. Days of rationing food and water had worn down the group. Every resource they had was shared among the small band of Etherwind survivors who'd taken refuge here. Now strength was scarce. Cove blinked, trying to focus. His vision swam with dark spots. But then, through the blur, he saw shapes moving at the mouth of the cave. Dark figures. At first, fear tightened his gut. Then the shimmer of the enchanted seal at the cave's entrance flickered, and a familiar voice rang out. "Cove," Tilly called. "We're here to get you all out." Cove jolted upright, startled. Sonnet's head snapped up as well. They looked at each other, the weight of despair lifting, just slightly, under the fragile spark of hope. With effort, they rose to their feet, limbs trembling. Each step toward the light was slow and labored, but they moved, together, toward the voice that called them home. Cove and Sonnet emerged into view. Tilly stood just outside the barrier, her face determined. Beside her were Aster and Sage. Cove's expression hardened the moment he saw her. "What is she doing here?" he snapped, his voice hoarse but sharp. Sage stood with her arms crossed, unreadable. Aster remained silent, shifting his weight slightly but offering no defense. "Cove, listen to me," Tilly said firmly. Sage found out the truth. He narrowed his eyes. "The king and queen of Duskmoor, they've been using her. Since birth," she continued. "A spy stole her from a farmer's doorstep. They raised her to be a weapon. Their pawn." Cove stared, silent. "Processing." He finally murmured, a sound of pain more than understanding. "She's broken the seal," Tilly said gently, stepping closer. "Please, Cove, get the others out. We can go home now." Her voice softened, almost a whisper. "You're all right now." The citizens of Etherwind had been rescued. Their long and harrowing journey home had ended as the castle gates loomed before them, tall, familiar, and now strangely foreboding. But peace was not waiting. The moment they stepped within the outer courtyard of the Etherwind royal castle, trouble struck. Castle guards spotted Sage immediately. Their eyes narrowed with suspicion, and their hands flew to their weapons, ready to strike. Before a single blade could leave its sheath, Tilly stepped forward, placing herself firmly between Sage and the soldiers. Her voice rang out, steady and strong. "If you wish to harm her," she declared, "you'll have to go through me, the Princess of Etherwind." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the guards. Their eyes darted from one another, unsure. The weight of Tilly's authority hung thick in the air. Then another voice joined hers, sharper, more commanding. "Stand down," Aster ordered. "It's not your place to decide her fate. That right belongs to the king and queen." The guards hesitated, but then slowly, their hands fell away from their hilts. They didn't sheath their swords, not entirely. Suspicion remained in their eyes, coiled tight in their stances, but for now, the threat had passed. Led through the grand halls of the castle, their footsteps echoed against the marble floors, each one a step closer to confrontation. Polished stone, chandeliers, banners fluttering slightly in the breeze from high windows, it all felt far too elegant for the storm that was about to break. Now, Sage and Tilly stood in the private living quarters of the King and Queen of Etherwind. The final reckoning had arrived. For the first time, Sage stood at the very heart of Etherwind. Not as a spy, not as a stranger, not quite an ally, but no longer an enemy either. That decision now lay in the hands of the King and Queen, and in Tilly's determination to sway them. The King's eyes burned with fury. His presence radiated the pressure of an oncoming storm. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered, arms crossed tightly across his chest. "Why are you protecting her? She will hurt you." Tilly held her ground. "Father, please listen." She stepped forward, desperation flickering in her voice, but not overpowering the strength beneath it. "Sage found out the truth. The king and queen of Duskmoor have been using her since she was born." She was devastated, Tilly continued. Everything she believed in, her family, her duty, her identity, was a lie. Tilly glanced at Sage, then turned back to her parents, voice growing firmer. "And despite all of that, she still freed the hostages. She brought us all home." Her gaze hardened. "Mother, Father, if you do not accept her into our home, then I will ask her to use her powers, and we will run away together." Sage's eyes widened in surprise, stunned by the declaration. "I trust her," Tilly said quietly. "And she trusts me." She took a breath. "The choice is yours." Silence followed, stretching longer than comfort allowed. The king exhaled a sharp breath and shook his head. Young people and their ways these days. He looked at Sage, his jaw clenched tight. "But mark my words," he growled, stepping forward. "If you so much as harm Tilly, you will regret it." His voice dropped into something colder, more final. "Do you hear me?" Sage stood tall, arms crossed, her tone sharp and resolute. "I'm only here for Tilly and no one else," she said coolly. She didn't look at the king, not the queen, just Tilly. Her arms remained folded, and her expression shifted into something unreadable, aloof, perhaps, or simply guarded. She had made her position clear. Tilly, beside her, said nothing. She shifted her weight, unsure, the silence wrapping around them all like thick fog. The tension refused to lift. And then, breaking through the stillness like the slow parting of a storm, came the sound of quiet footsteps. The queen moved forward. Her face was soft with sorrow, her eyes shining with unshed emotion as she crossed the marble floor with slow, heavy steps. There was no judgment in her gait, only aching relief. She reached her daughter. "Oh, Tilly," the queen whispered, pulling her into an embrace. "I'm so glad you are safe, my dear." Tilly sank into the hug, letting herself be held, if only for a moment. But even as the warmth lingered, the queen's attention drifted. Sage stood a short distance away, watching but unmoved. She didn't retreat, but she didn't open herself either. The queen approached her next, tentatively. "Oh, Sage." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I have always thought about you, my baby." Behind her, Tilly turned slightly, smiling softly at the sight. But Sage did not return the gesture. Her tone remained unchanged, as distant as ever. "Like I said," she replied, "I'm only here for Tilly." And with that, she turned her face away, arms still crossed. Tilly giggled lightly, not unkindly, perhaps recognizing the stubbornness in Sage, the need to protect herself, to build walls even in a moment that could have melted them. The queen, perhaps sensing it too, said no more. She quietly stepped away, retreating toward the back of the chamber. The moment of warmth faded like the last light of dusk. Tilly glanced between her mother and father, then to Sage. Her smile faded, replaced by a nervous edge. She shifted her stance, then turned to her parents with a hesitant breath. "Now," she began, scratching at the back of her neck, "I have another pressing matter to tell you." Tilly shifted awkwardly, her hand rising to scratch the back of her neck. She glanced at her parents, her nerves clear on her face. Her father's stern voice cut through the moment. "What is it, child? Out with it." Tilly drew in a breath, then said with a sudden smile, "I want to marry Aster." Beside her, Sage let out a delighted giggle, amused but unsurprised. In the throne room, the queen gasped, visibly startled, while the king groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We hired him to be your knight," the king muttered, "not to fall in love with him." Tilly rolled her eyes playfully. "Well, You both knew that Aster and I have known each other for so long, she pointed out. It's no wonder you assigned him to me. He's of high society, after all. She straightened slightly, her voice becoming more earnest. You've known him, his parents, his siblings, since we were children. Silence followed. Her parents exchanged glances. The queen rubbed her arm in awkward thought, while the king exhaled heavily, resignation in his expression. Tilly's voice softened. We love each other. Her gaze lowered. We never acted on our feelings before, but after everything that's happened, we realized how short life is. So we confessed. She lifted her eyes again. I know you probably hoped I'd marry a prince or a king from another kingdom. But her smile returned tender and sure. What Aster and I have is real. It's genuine. True love. She giggled lightly, eyes glowing. I only have eyes for him. And he only has eyes for me. The room quieted, her words hanging in the air like a whispered prayer. Then the queen spoke, her tone soft and touched with emotion. Our Tilly has found true love, a rare and precious thing. She turned to her husband. And since it is with Aster, well, he is a fine young man. We know his family. He's loyal, brave, kind. The king grumbled, but his shoulders dropped. Very well. Tilly's smile brightened as her heart swelled. Because we don't know if we'll survive this war. I was thinking. She took a breath, her voice trembling with both nerves and excitement. Aster and I should marry tomorrow, late afternoon. Sage beamed beside her, clearly delighted. Tomorrow, the queen gasped. Yes, Tilly nodded quickly, excitement growing. In the castle gardens. Just a small ceremony. Those in the castle can attend. And we can ask one of the wise mages to perform the enchantment matrimony for us. She softened. And in the future, if we survive all of this, we'll invite the nobles and royals for a grand wedding. But this one would be just ours. Her voice trembled with sincerity. Please, mother. Father, let me do this. The queen's expression melted. She stepped forward, eyes warm. Of course, dear. The king sighed once more, but this time there was no edge in it. All right. Tilly squealed, unable to contain her joy. She threw her arms in the air and bounced with happiness while Sage burst into uncontrollable laughter beside her. In that moment, joy spilled into the room, bright and sincere. Tomorrow, beneath the sun of destiny, an enchanted union would begin. After receiving her parents' blessing for the union, Tilly's heart raced with anticipation. The weight that had lingered on her shoulders for days had been lifted, replaced now with a surge of urgency. She needed to see Aster. She hurried through the winding halls of the castle, her footsteps echoing against the stone. She questioned everyone she passed, servants, guards, even wandering court mages, each offering her only vague gestures and half-answers. Still, she pressed on, determination burning in her chest. At last, after what felt like a breathless eternity, she reached one of the guest chambers. Her hand hesitated for only a moment on the handle. Then she stepped inside. And there he was. Tilly's breath hitched. A quiet gasp escaped her lips as she took in the scene before her. Aster stood near the tall, ornate mirror, unaware of her presence. He was shirtless, his tunic folded neatly on the nearby table, and the flickering candlelight danced across his skin. Shadows clung to the sculpted ridges of his chest, moving like reverent hands across every curve of muscle earned through years of battle and discipline. His broad shoulders tapered into a torso carved with strength, each line a silent record of his hardships, his loyalty, his sacrifices, his resolve. Enchanted moonlight spilled through the high windows, casting silver over the plains of his abdomen, highlighting every defined contour as if the stars themselves had traced him into being. Tilly stood frozen, her fingers twitching at her sides as if reaching for him without permission. A strange and quiet yearning stirred in her chest, raw and sudden and undeniable. As if fate itself whispered, "He is yours, and you are his." Then, as though drawn by that invisible tether between them, Aster turned. His eyes found hers instantly, deep, smoldering, and filled with unspoken emotion. The moment their gazes locked, the world fell away, and Tilly felt her breath leave her body entirely. Aster quickly tugged his shirt back on, startled by her presence but unable to stop the soft smile forming on his lips. The moment of vulnerability had passed, but the warmth in his eyes remained. "It's so good to see you, Tilly," he said, his voice low and flirtatious, the kind that always made her heart flutter just a little too fast. Tilly stepped closer, her blush betraying the rush of feelings beneath her calm expression. Her hands clasped in front of her for a moment before she met his eyes with a spark of excitement. "Aster," she beamed. "We can get married." Aster's eyes widened. "Truly?" "Your parents agreed." She nodded, still smiling, her eyes glowing like dawn breaking over a long, dark night. "They were resistant at first," she admitted, "but since they've known you and your family for so long, they eventually accepted." Relief washed over Aster's face, giving way to something tender, an almost shy admiration. "That's more than amazing." But then his smile faltered slightly. "But Tilly, there's still a war. It feels surreal to think of marriage when everything still hangs in the balance." Tilly stepped closer again, lifting her chin slightly as if challenging fate itself. "That's exactly why we must do it now, while we still can," she said softly. "We'll have a small ceremony in the castle gardens, just those inside the castle and our closest friends," she continued, her voice steady and full of quiet purpose. "One of the wise mages can perform an enchantment matrimony." Aster inhaled slowly as the words sank in. Tilly pressed on. "You already know how sacred that bond is," she whispered. "It will tie our souls together, stronger than any force in this realm." Aster's breath hitched. His cheeks flushed, a deeper red than before. "And after the war," Tilly added gently, "we'll have a grand wedding, with nobles and royals and all the celebration we deserve." She reached for his hand now, grounding them in this moment of fragile hope. "But tomorrow," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "after we've rested, let us be wed beneath the late afternoon sun." Aster blinked, startled by the nearness of the moment. "Tomorrow?" Aster's gaze softened, yet there was a flicker of worry behind his eyes as he stepped closer. "Are you truly sure you want to be married tomorrow?" he asked, his voice gentle, searching hers for even a trace of doubt. Tilly's eyes shimmered in the candlelight, her expression vulnerable but unwavering. "With all my heart, Aster," she said softly. She lowered her gaze for a moment, her fingers fidgeting at her side. There was so much happening in the world: uncertainty, war, the threat of loss, and yet, in this fragile space between heartbeats, her answer was the only thing she was truly sure of. Aster's lips curved in a tender smile. "I am overjoyed beyond words," he murmured, stepping even closer. "But I needed to hear you say it, to know it's what you truly desire." He didn't wait another second. In one motion, he closed the distance between them and swept her into a kiss, deep, passionate, and reverent. Time slowed. The world outside their chamber vanished. In that kiss, he gave her his vow, and in the way she returned it, she sealed her own. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Tilly looked up at him with a coy smile. Aster grinned back and gave her a playful wink. "Come on, my love," he said, his voice warm. "Let's all get cleaned up, have dinner, and rest well." But then, a shadow flickered in his tone as reality crept back in. "Tomorrow is our special day, before the war changes everything." He paused, voice lowering, serious now. "And before they realize that Sage is missing." Tilly's heart skipped a beat. Her breath caught. The joy of their shared moment clashed with the knowledge that danger was never far behind.